Hello everyone. First of all, welcome to all of you and thanks for tuning into our webinar. Our guest speaker today is Kevin Labik from EPAM Empathy Lab, one of our global strategic partners at Adam. Kevin is the co-head of digital engagement at EPAM. To better understand the impact of omnichannel on the relationship between CIO and CMO, EPAM, CIO Magazine and the CMO Club have conducted a study of over 400 CIOs and CMOs. We've asked EPAM to share their insights as one of the initiators and key stakeholders of this study. So in today's webinar, Kevin will discuss several key findings from this joint research. What emerged from the CIO-CMO Omnichannel Crossroads report are three critical crossroads that demand attention from both the CIO and CMO in order to succeed long-term in an omnichannel world. It identifies three crucial business intersections that, if not addressed jointly, can create significant hurdles in executing successful strategies. Miscommunication harms the bottom line, technology funding is a tug of war, the omnichannel flashpoint is mobile. In addition, you will also receive up to 7 recommended steps to forge the CIO-CMO relationship. And we're also confident that you'll appreciate an electronic copy of this valuable Omnichannel Crossroads report for all of our participants as part of a follow-up to this session. But before we start, just a couple of house rules. You will be muted during the entire webinar to guarantee an optimal listening experience. Any questions you may have can be posted in the appropriate section of the GoToMeeting interface and will be handled during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Kevin. Kevin?
Thank you for the introduction, Wim. I'm very happy to be with you all today, sharing the results of research EPAM conducted with the CIO Magazine and the CMO Club on the CIO-CMO dynamic. We have limited time, so I'll jump right to it.
As Forrester Research coins it, we're in the age of the customer, an age in which the buyer, and not the manufacturer or the seller, has the power. And given price transparency, feature proliferation, and the decreasing efficacy of traditional advertising, it is now the experience organizations provide that is their most powerful tool to win that customer over and stave off commoditization. But as we all know, offering delightful, differentiated experiences isn't easy. Today's consumer and even business customer is shockingly hard to pin down and tough to please. These buyers are increasingly nomadic, demanding targeted content anytime, anywhere, and across multiple channels. Worse, relevance. Once the highest aspiration of marketers and brands has become table stakes. To win with customers, companies need to offer anticipatory experiences. Experiences that incorporate location, preferences both stated and inferred, behavioral and transactional history, insights gleaned from social activity, and also make darn good guesses about context. Is the customer at that moment walking a store, driving a car, watching TV? John McCarthy, a senior analyst from Forrester, uses a phrase that really registered with us at EPAM. Software is the brand. It's an acknowledgement of how much technology now underpins the customer experience, and it sums up why companies are racing to transform themselves digitally. When you break the phrase into its two key pieces, it becomes very apparent who in the organization needs to be involved in making this digital transformation a reality, the CIO and the CMO, which is why EPAM embarked with its partners on this study. The CIO-CMO partnership is essential to meeting the needs of the customer, and it is a partnership that historically has been fraught with both conflict and misunderstanding.
Our goal is to get an updated view of how top IT and marketing executives perceive each other's role, divide their responsibilities, and collaborate on key initiatives. We then sought to identify opportunities and best practices to strengthen their relationship and their team's performances. Altogether, we connected with over 400 executives, evenly split between the CIO and CMO offices. When you step back and think about where the conflict between these roles come from, it's not that difficult to comprehend. Sure, one role focused on technology, the other marketing, but it's deeper than that. It's a fundamentally different mindset that thinks in terms of programs versus campaigns, or stability versus growth? And when one person's action is all about risk mitigation, how can there not be conflict and potentially resentment when their partner is compelled by virtue of her mission to place bets and take risks? In preparation for this webinar, we took a look at some recent research on the topic to see what others have uncovered. What we found was a little inconsistent. CIO Magazine's latest survey reports 82% of CIOs and 77% of CMOs claim their relationships were good or excellent, while a report by the CMO Club and Oracle took note that only 1 of 112 CMOs referenced a positive relationship with their CIO. And even in that CIO Magazine report, 26% of CIOs viewed their CMO as rogue players, while 14% of CIOs viewed their marketing counterparts as roadblocks. Looking at it from an operational perspective, a recent Forrester report cited less than 40% of CMOs believe their marketing and technology teams worked well together. Now, getting current sentiment is important, and a lot of research starts and ends there. To add something new to the industry conversation, EPAM decided to look not at the baseline, but at the trend. We asked CIOs and CMOs, how has your relationship changed over the past 3 years? Our findings were positive. The majority of respondents reporting that the relationship with their counterpart was either somewhat or much closer over the period. However, as I mentioned, the state of the CIO-CMO relationship wasn't really our focus. More important, we feel, is getting a handle on the sources of conflict and misunderstanding and to gain clarity on how these two players may find resolution and ultimately build a thriving partnership. Our findings on what's getting in the way were pretty conclusive. The top 3 points of contention identified by our 400 CIOs and CMOs were language, funding, and ownership. To anyone who has given thought to the CIO-CMO dynamic, these shouldn't be particularly surprising. It's when you look at the details that led to our findings that things get more interesting, because it's there that you can see a pathway towards resolution. Let's first delve into what we call the language barrier. Now, it's important to note that we call it this not because CIOs and CMOs use different language. Actually, when it came to key terms associated with digital transformation, CIOs and CMOs use the same terminology. It's just that when they use it, they often mean very different things, and that's where the trouble lies. When asked what a digital product is, CIOs define them as custom software designed to be a core business capability, while CMOs thought of it as box software or a purchase SaaS solution meant to address an acute business need. In response to what is a platform, CIOs saw it as a software tool to be integrated with the enterprise, while CMO defined it as a complete system that quite possibly stood alone. To a CIO, Agile is software development methodology, while to a CMO, it's a desired state of operations. And finally, CIOs define omnichannel as systems with real-time data flow, while CMOs think of it as an appropriate and consistent customer experience. EPAM's read is, to an extent, they're both right, but it's the one-dimensionality of their perspectives that is cause for alarm. Combine their responses and you'll get both sides of the coin, and thus a more viable, valuable definition. Next, funding. This is also a well-explored topic, starting back in 2012 when Gartner famously predicted that by 2017, CMOs would outspend CIOs in technology. IDC has since predicted lines of business will control as much as 40% of tech spending by 2016, and Accenture predicts the CMO budget will soon be 3/4 devoted to digital technology. Going back to our theme of trends, we asked CIOs and CMOs their prediction on how the CIO's control of technology budget will change over time. While CIOs came back with a fairly pragmatic response, CMOs overwhelmingly predicted a decrease in the CIO budget, clearly agreeing with popular industry sentiment. We thought it might then be interesting to ask, well, how often do projects outside of IT control run amok? Here, it was the CMO's turn to be pragmatic, as the majority from both sides said there was frequent instances of delivery problems when IT wasn't the primary. Not too surprising, CIOs took a bit more aggressive view on just how often things went awry. Now, on to the final source of conflict, ownership. For the most part, what we found was encouraging. When asked which areas of digital should you own, there seemed to be good consensus on who should take one. CIOs and CMOs mostly agree that advertising platforms belonged in marketing, content management platforms were best under IT, online video platforms were the domain of the CMO, and e-commerce platforms needed to be owned by the CIO. Not saying that EPAM totally agrees with the split. More to the point, we counsel joint ownership, but at least our partners in the C-suite are on the same page. However, it's when you get to mobile applications that our players stop seeing eye to eye. The majority of both CIOs and CMOs believe mobile belongs to them. In our qualitative interviews with the audience, we found out why. Both sides saw mobile as perhaps the single most important area of digital for their organization to focus on. Next, mobile's traditional placement in IT gave the CIO good justification to hold on, but mobile's significant relevance to the customer experience motivated the CMO to reach for it. Speaking of customer experience, the nature of mobile development, especially native apps, makes it unclear which elements and components are code and function and which fall under branding, merchandising, and communication. Finally, mobile, however incorrectly, is often shorthand for omnichannel, which, as we saw earlier, is a point of confusion between the two executives. Now, looking at what's behind the battle over mobile made the team at EPAM realize the potential next area of ownership conflict for CIOs and CMOs: big data. Like mobile, big data is also getting tremendous attention, with many analysts, both industry and Wall Street, hammering company executives for not being able to articulate a clear strategy on its use. Also like mobile, this data traditionally has been under the control of IT. However, the ability to extract commercial value from big data is very marketing dependent. And to put more urgency on the topic, mastery of big data is required to power the anticipatory omnichannel experiences needed for customer success. We'll end this part of the talk by highlighting a few more reasons why the CIO and CMO need this partnership to work. Ben Franklin summed it up pretty well with this quote, and here are some supporting facts. First, there's a clear trend, one that the CIO and CMO should be very disturbed by, of new roles popping up in the C-suite. The Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Digital Officer, the Chief Customer Officer, and perhaps most blatant, the Chief Marketing Technology Officer. The CIO and CMO need to realize that these new roles have come about to fill the gap that their faulty partnership has created. Organizations have only so much tolerance for overhead, so CIOs and CMOs need to either get it together or risk extinction. And while the trend is clearly towards CMO empowerment, when it comes to digital, they need to recognize just how much they need their CIO counterpart. According to Adobe's recent study, less than half of marketers rated themselves as effective in digital marketing. Less than 40% believe that they had adequate processes for digital, and CMO confidence in terms of their unit's capabilities were lowest in the areas of e-commerce, personalization, targeting, and analytics, key elements of digital transformation. So now that we understand what the issues getting in the way of the CIO and CMO partnerships are, we're reminded, we've reminded ourselves why it matters to them in their organizations. The next question is, how can they improve this dynamic and thus increase their company's ability to meet the needs of the customer and the marketplace? From our study and additional research EPAM's conducted since its original publishing, we've come up with 7 clear steps CIOs and CMOs must take to forge a true performance-centric partnership. Step 1, establish a common tongue. Our study uncovered the confusion surrounding many of the key terms associated with digital transformation. CIOs and CMOs need to dig beneath the jargon and establish a shared understanding of the words that make up their mission statements and strategic plans. Now, this can only happen as they work through the actions they need to take. For example, when embracing Agile or designing digital products. A McKinsey white paper on the topic made a good suggestion to identify translators in each department, meaning technologists who speak marketing and marketers who talk tech. Step 2, cross-train in each other's disciplines. A CMO who doesn't understand and isn't passionate about technology isn't going to be a CMO for very much longer. Conversely, a CIO considers branding and customer experience as fluff will soon be working help desk tickets. These executives need to be not just conversant in each other's disciplines, but they need to have meaningful perspectives on how they can contribute. And while it may be intimidating hill for some to climb, the first steps can be as simple as swapping reading lists, attending each other's industry conferences, preferably together, so one can act as a navigator and tour guide for the other. When the CIO and CMO recognize the value in investing time teaching each other the fundamental of their respective areas, that's when the partnership will exist in more than just name. Step 3, align on the customer experience vision. In the age of the customer, the organization's experience vision is perhaps the most important asset in securing a successful future. If the CIO and CMO don't share in it, the vision can never fully be realized. It starts with the two getting on the same page as to whom their customers are. Which are the most profitable? Which are aspirational? Who cannot be alienated? Next, what journeys do these customers travel on their way to engaging, transacting, and re-engaging with the brand? What then is the ideal experience to provide them at each stage of their respective paths? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Most importantly, how can this vision be deconstructed into strategic imperatives and tactical requirements? Step 4, co-author a digital roadmap that ties technology and process to the vision. With a shared vision and its requirements in hand, the CIO and CMO must together plot its construction. Transformative experiences are not one-solution horses. Many of the respondents to the Oracle survey I cited earlier reported owning between 10 and 30 discrete, significant digital products or solutions. It's critical the CIO and CMO understand the technology ecosystem required to power their vision. And given the complexity of getting the pieces to work together and the data to flow freely through the system, they need to be totally in sync on the MVP definition and the program's practical phased evolution. Step 5, pool resources to support the plan. With future state articulated and planned, the CIO and CMO will need to cost out the effort and decide who does what. If they attempt to do this without each other, they'll quickly realize they lack the money and the resources. The only viable way to pull off the vision will be to pool their budgets and their people, and even then there may be shortfalls. Most likely there will be talent gaps that exist where the lines between marketing and technology get blurry. Additionally, there could be funding gaps, again, probably for the tools and integrations needed to establish the connective tissues between marketing solutions and IT systems. As the euphemism goes, this will give the CIO and CMO an opportunity for excellence and really test their partnership as together they go to the CFO to lobby for additional headcount and budget. Step 6, create a culture of collaboration between IT and marketing units. The CIO and CMO speaking each other's language, sharing a vision, knowing how to collaborate is essential. But if this partnership stops with them, it has limited value. What they need is a flywheel, a culture of partnership that self-perpetuates and extends through the second and third layers of management. Inspiring emails, office posters, and two-day offsites may feel like valuable actions, but as we all know, that is not how behaviors change for the long term. Instead, emphasis needs to be placed on the creation of cross-functional teams with clear goals, measures, and frequent check-ins. Cross-unit reporting and mentoring is essential to make this work, but it's okay to use dotted or virtual connections if the organization isn't ready to formally change reporting lines. One first step may be to pair marketing analysts with IT data scientists. Finally, step 7, use mobile and big data as immediate high-impact opportunities to collaborate. Our study identified mobile ownership as a key area of contention, and EPAM predicts big data will be next. Conflict creates energy. And while this energy can be destructive, it can also be harnessed for progress. The CIO and CMO need to declare joint ownership of these two pillars of digital transformation. Given the prior confusion, there are likely parallel efforts underway that will need to be quickly identified and merged to avoid waste. This should be the first order of business. Next, the CIO and CMO may want to empower their new cross-functional team to craft a clear plan on how mobile and data will support the vision. They should consider targeting modest wins at first to allow this team to build confidence and competency in their collaboration, perfecting blocking and tackling before setting out on more sophisticated initiatives. Now, before we open it up to discussion, we wanted to leave you with a parting thought. Based on the research, the CIOs and CMOs we connect with, and frankly, the IT and marketing executives we work with every day in our normal course of business, they get it. They see the writing on the wall and they understand the need for partnership. The question is, can they and their teams below them adopt the new behaviors required to effectively, efficiently drive digital transformation, even if, especially if, it's not specifically mandated by the CEO, board of directors, or other members of the executive committee. We think this is essential, as the CIO and CMO together have the best perspective inside the C-suite on what digital transformation actually means and what it takes to get there. Thank you for listening. We hope you found it valuable, and I'm now going to pass the mic over to Wim to lead the Q&A phase of our webinar.
Thank you, Kevin. That was very interesting. Let me see if we have some questions that came in from our participants, and I already see some of them come through. One of the questions I'm seeing here is, does the CMO really need to understand how the technology works, or do they need to understand what the technology can do?
I think that's a great question. And, you know, both from the research and where we saw partnerships thrive, it's not necessary for the CMO to be a technologist. It's more the appreciation of what the technology can do for them and how it can accelerate and help them actualize the experience vision and the business vision. So how it works is really why they have a partner in the CIO. What it can do for them, how to leverage it, how to apply it towards business objectives, absolutely they need to know that.
Okay. So another question is, some companies don't have a CMO. How does the CIO, or who does the CIO need to partner with in those cases?
Yep. We see this too. We would think in situations like that, actually, it may not just be one person, one role, it may be several. And, you know, the titles are heads of e-commerce, heads of digital, various product owners, and sometimes, and actually ideally, it would be the CEO in that situation. Whoever it is that's really going to own the customer experience. That's most important, since what we're talking about is centering the energies of their talents around transforming the customer experience, since that is really going to be the point of differentiation for organizations moving forward, which are all necessarily becoming digital. It needs to be partnering with the people or the roles that are closest to the customer and entrusted to define or help co-define what that differentiated next generation experience will be.
Okay, so that would include sales probably as well.
Yeah.
Okay, one question here is, does consumerization of enterprise technology start more from the CMO or from the CIO?
I would say it's got to start with both. It's traditionally been in the CMO camp where they've been thinking about ways to, you know, they're the ones looking to drive sales, acquire customers. So inherent in their focus is commercialization. But the, you know, understanding of the technology, right, that's going to be belonging within the IT offices. So this is that perfect opportunity for the CMO to tutor, train, you know, workshop with the CIO around what exactly are those objectives? What is the strategy to acquire new customers? What's the lifetime value of these customers? What's the bigger picture there? And then for them to work together around how to then take the existing stack or ecosystem or the products and solutions that they are evaluating and how those can be leveraged for commercialization.
Okay, I think we have time for another question, a question that came in at the beginning of the presentation when you were showing the ownership between CIO and CMO. I think in the meantime the question may have been answered in the second part, but nonetheless, how can you separate ownership of platforms when the result needs to be a single seamless experience between content, commerce, and mobile?
I think the person who asked that question answered the question beautifully. So we don't want to see a division of ownership, although in practical terms, it may have to fall under someone's budget, or someone needs to be the primary in evaluating the various vendors and solutions out there, making decisions as to what are some of the key requirements that you're trying to meet. However, it needs to be a partnership, and so that's why although as we look through the survey results, we saw that there was some consensus around the C-suite on who should own what. EPAM's take is it should be joint ownership. Maybe one's the primary based on how is it more customer facing at its core? Is it a bit more development or IT intensive? That might lead towards who's primary, who's secondary. But we agree, joint ownership.
Okay. Okay, that no more questions in the box here. So that concludes pretty much today's session. Kevin, I would like to thank you for your presentation and your willingness to share your experience and best practices with our audience. Thanks again to all our participants for participating, and I look forward to see you again in one of our next webinars. Thank you and have a great day.